Hey everyone, welcome to another edition of PowerCore Productions and Podcastings. I'm your host, back to hit you with another video, and today we are going to be continuing My Hero Academia, The Dark Knight Returns. What if Deku was Batman? Part 2. But first, as always, if you are a fan of the channel and everything else that we have to offer, then please don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, share, and hit that bell for post notifications so you can stay up to date on everything that is PowerCore Productions and Podcasting stats to come out now and in the future. So as we go into part 2 of this series, where we last left off, Izuku Midoriya met with the famed Bruce Wayne. In this universe, the story of Batman takes place in Japan, within the My Hero Academia universe. Separated from all other forms of DC canon, this only focuses on the Batman mythos and universe, self-contained if you will. We see Bruce Wayne in the retirement phase of his career, having retired after his last battle with All for One, assisting with All Might. He now takes on a new protege, a young man whom he sees great promise in. However, just because Izuku is getting a helping hand to become a hero, that doesn't mean that things are going to be easy for him. Far from it. You see, Izuku has to give more than just 100%. He has to give more than even plus ultra. Mainly because he is a hero without a quirk. And if he truly is going to inherit the mantle of the Dark Knight, then Izuku must embody everything the Dark Knight stands for and beyond. While he will meet new heroes and friends along the way, there are also dangerous foes lurking in the shadows, just waiting to get their chance at the Dark Knight. For all this and more, stay tuned as we now continue My Hero Academia, The Dark Knight Returns. What if Deku was Batman? As always, sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. As Izuku made his way into UA High, an overwhelming sense of both pride and nervousness washed over him. Izuku had changed a lot in his last 2 years of training, ever since he had met with Bruce Wayne, when he discovered the truth of what happened to the Batman. So much had changed for him in his life. For Izuku, the night that he ran into the fire to save that young boy, he didn't think much of it, why he had done what he had done. For Izuku, he had always wanted to be a hero, even if he didn't have a quirk, although he wasn't sure of how to go about it. Now, granted, there were many people who speculated about the Batman for years. Many believed he had a quirk, others believed he didn't. Some believed that Batman's quirk was psychological, that he induced fear into his enemies, while others believed that Batman was a master of psychology and knew how to work against his opponents. There were many who claimed he was, and many who claimed he wasn't. Izuku learned the truth, however. The truth about Batman was that he was quirkless, and yes, he did use fear to his advantage, but it was more than that. You see, in order to be a hero, you have to understand quirks in general. At least that's what Batman believed. He fought against a quirk villain who had the ability to mutate himself into that of a large croc, aka Killer Croc. He actually fought against someone who actually did have a quirk. He gave off a pheromone that induced fear, and he was known as the Scarecrow. But of all the villains that Batman ever fought, the one who was his greatest adversary was the one that was quirkless. He was known as the Clown Prince of Crime, the Joker. Little is known about the Joker's origins or where he had come from. No one knew quite for sure who he originally was. There was no background history on the Joker. There was no identification about him. He had so many aliases that no one could tell where one began and where one ended. Even during the time when Tokyo had the famed Arkham Asylum, it did little to help many of the villains that were deemed criminally insane. Even still, though, Bruce acknowledged that the Joker was one of his greatest foes, and he didn't have a quirk. As such, quirks were not the end-all be-all when it came to heroes or villains. It was about knowledge. Knowledge was power, and how you use that knowledge could mean the difference between life and death. So often, people were so caught up in the glitz and the glams of the powers that they forget that it takes knowledge to learn how to use them. You can shoot fireballs, or shoot laser beams, or ice rays, or have the ability to level cities all you want, but if you don't know how to use the power properly, then it's as worthless as trash. Bruce had seen plenty of people who had powerful quirks in their own right, and he'd managed to beat them time and time again, whereas there were heroes whom he had met who had quirks who couldn't do the same. Izuku had to learn that every quirk had a weakness. It was just a matter of learning how to exploit that weakness. Because of that, his training over the last 2 years had been intense. From ages 13 to 14 and now 15, Izuku had been drilled into his training. He learned how to pay more than the usual attention, and as a result, he was on a level that was rivaling that of many of the Robins that had come before him. However, Bruce did not view training Izuku as training a Robin. He was training someone to take up the role of the Batman, something that many of his predecessors had not been able to take on. Even the best of them refused this role. From Dick to Jason to Tim, none of them felt as though they could take on the mantle of the Bat. But Izuku, he was given that opportunity, as it was something he wanted. As Izuku made his way through the doors of UA, he noticed many of the students around him. A bubbly girl with pink cheeks who seemed fairly happy. A boy who seemed stern and serious. There was also Bakugo. As Bakugo walked up to Izuku, there wasn't malice, as he had seen Izuku had definitely grown in the last few years. Izuku, while he didn't change outwardly, at least in the sense of Izuku didn't use his newfound knowledge and skills to try to gain higher up in popularity, Izuku just did little things. For one, he just didn't take crap from Bakugo anymore. Whenever Bakugo tried to fight him, Izuku was able to counter him pretty effectively. They were able to acknowledge that each one was capable in their own right. So Deku, you're actually going through with this? Of course I am, Kachan. This is my dream. I get it, but even still. You've been doing a little bit of that training and whatnot, but I don't know if you're ready to handle something like this. And what makes you so sure that I can't? Because I'm quirkless? Exactly. Look, I'll acknowledge, you're pretty good, you're decent. But what are you gonna do when you go up against some villain who can literally lift up mountains and crush them on you? I'll just have to figure out a plan, Kachan. What, you just think you can figure out a plan for everything, Deku? Well, it worked pretty good on you, didn't it? Shut up, you damn nerd. I'll have you know, you only just got good. And even still, whenever we spar, I still have the upper hand. You're right, Kachan. You have a quirk and I don't. And you're just as skilled of a fighter as I am. Although I think I hold the edge on you in that regard. Well, now it's time to put up or shut up. If you make it that far. Kachan smiled as he walked over to his exam room. They were being separated into different groups, and thankfully Izuku and Bakugo wouldn't be in the same one. They both wished each other luck in a way as they entered into the exam halls. First, there would be the written portion of the exam, which for Izuku was a lot easier than in the original. You see, Izuku focused not only on his physical training but his mental. Bruce making sure that Izuku had a fine understanding of hero knowledge. far beyond even that of the first years. As a result, Izuku's scores were high in range, putting him in the top percentile. But that was just a written test. Now it was time for the physical portion. The students were told to take their gear and use whatever equipment they believed were necessary. Izuku registered himself as quirkless, so as a result, he would be allowed to use any gadgets or weapons as long as they were pre-registered. Izuku didn't take much with him. He took some simple batarangs. They weren't actually shaped like batarangs because he didn't want to give off his identity right away. So you could say that they were simple shurikens, to say the least. He also had with him his katana, especially built, something that could cut through even the toughest of material when given a good swing. Izuku wouldn't consider himself a sword master in any way, but he figured he better be prepared in case he needed it. And then finally, he had a grappling hook that he could use to swing and move around when necessary. Also, Izuku was wearing an all-black tracksuit, as well as some combat shoes and combat gloves. But underneath the tracksuit was something that was a lot more enduring. He was wearing a specially made bodysuit. It was kind of similar to that of a wetsuit, but it was a lot more different. You see, the suit was made out of fire-resistant material. It was light, easy to move, as well as it being something that was known as an amplifier. It was the cutting-edge technology for Wayne Enterprises, but it was something that wasn't released to the general public. You see, this sort of suit that Izuku wore under his tracksuit uniform was something that could slightly increase his strength. Not to any ridiculous amount, no. You could say that if Izuku were at a 5, it doubled him to a 10, but that was just his own natural strength. Wearing this, at most, Izuku would be capable of moving a car if necessary. Not even lifting it fully, but maybe he could lift half of the car off the ground. It was just enough so that Izuku could be at his best at all times. Nothing too fancy, nothing too dramatic, nothing that you could consider illegal. As Izuku made his way to the starting line as they entered into a replica city, they were given the instructions of what they would be doing. They would be facing off against robots, because of course they were. President Mike would reveal that each robot was worth different points. There were 1-point robots, there were 3-point robots, 5-point robots, and then finally there was the 0-pointer. The 0-pointer was the largest of them all, and it was well worth no points, so it was something they should want to avoid. As Izuku looked around, he saw another girl. She was wearing a pink tracksuit. She looked rather nervous, her glasses shaking, as her blonde hair went swaying in either side. Izuku walked up to her as he had some concern as he could see the fear on her face. Hey, are you alright? Oh, me? Yeah, I'm fine. Cool weapon. Oh, yeah, I just use tools because I'm quirkless. Oh, really? The girl would say. In her own mind, the first thing she would think was, he's like how I used to be. Well, I guess you could be a hero without one after all. Really? She would say out loud. You're quirkless? Yeah, I found out when I was younger I don't actually have a quirk. Then how are you... Well, what are you gonna... I've been training. Hopefully what I've learned can get me to the next level. But that's just something we'll have to wait and see now, won't we? The girl would nod as she introduced herself. I'm Melissa. My name's Izuku. The two shook hands and wished each other luck as they went their separate ways. When out of nowhere, President Mike would yell that there was no countdown when it came to emergencies and they needed to get moving. The students all started to run through the city all at once. Izuku, using his grappling hook, would quickly move to the rooftops as he swung from building to building. The teachers and the proctors were watching on as the exam was taking place. All Might, who was among them, had his eyes on two students in particular. The girl, Melissa, and Izuku. They were both very intriguing, to say the least. As Izuku moved forward, he would come across the smaller one-point robots. They were easy enough to take out. Izuku had done a lot of studying when it came to fighting different types of villains, robots being one of them. Batman, in his younger years, didn't really care for robot henchmen all that much. Now, sure, there were some androids that were sophisticated, that were top of the line, ones that couldn't be so easily destroyed. But these were just your common run-of-the-mill robots. They had exposed joints, wires, and things of that nature. They were pretty easy to take down if you knew where to look. For Izuku, the goal was simple: to stick and move, attack the joints, disable them, destroy them, and keep on moving. Don't waste any of your energy fighting and attacking in the pointless areas. For example, many heroes with quirks would often think that attacking the chest of the robot or trying to destroy its main body, that would be the most effective. That won't be the most effective, because the main body of the robot is often the most reinforced part of the machine. However, if the robot takes on a humanoid form, the best place to strike would be at the shoulder joints and at the hip joints of the robot, as that impedes its movement and its attacking power. Once those have been impeded, it's always best to try to go for the head or neck area, as that might be the quickest way to take them down. Izuku, using this knowledge to his advantage, would take his shuriken and he would aim them at those exact spots. It would cause the robots to be snapped at a few of their joints, causing them to stall long enough for Izuku to go in for a clean strike. He was making sure to hit them in the most vulnerable of areas, to avoid wasting his time trying to cut through something that just wasn't going to budge. And because of this, Izuku was able to rack up points fairly decently. It wasn't that he was plowing through a lot of the robots like a few others were. No, Izuku didn't have that luxury, but he was able to stick and move. He was able to work smarter and not harder. And the proctors were taking note of this as Izuku's scores were going up decently. On the other side, the girl in the pink tracksuit, well, she was doing decently enough. She seemed to have had a strong kind of super muscular quirk or something like that. A few of them commented that she was a lot like All Might. All Might getting a bit nervous because he knew the truth. As the girl continued, while she was doing fairly well, there was also a strong sense of nervousness within her. She was pacing herself. She didn't seem like she was going all out, but rather like she was trying to make sure that she didn't. You see, under her tracksuit, she was wearing a similar type of body armor. Well, not precisely. It was a special kind of bodysuit that was underneath her tracksuit. However, unlike Izuku's, this wasn't to try to increase her strength. This was just to try to hold her body together. You see, she had been training for a few years as well, with her new abilities. And through much growing pain, she learned the hard way that the human body can only do but so much. As a result, her suit was made to help her channel her power, so that she didn't accidentally blow off her limbs every time she went in to throw a punch. The girl stuck to fighting against the one-pointers, mainly because it was the best for her pace and speed. Her points were a lot slower, but she was taking out a lot more of the one-pointers a lot faster. And whenever a 2-point or 3-point robot came along, she would make sure to strike directly for the head. She would let out a little burst of power before channeling right back down. At most, she had only managed to master up to 5% of her power. 5% was still pretty incredible, but still, it was only 5%. As they continued on, Izuku would take a brief break to catch his breath. He had defeated a good amount of robots, but still, he knew that he could probably do some more. It was then that he heard a cry, a girl yelling who had been caught under some rubble, and the students were moving out of the way as there was a 0-point robot that was moving forward. While many of the other students were running, Izuku went racing towards the young girl to give her a hand. As he met her, she would exclaim that she had some debris trapping her foot, keeping her from moving. Seeing this, Izuku would immediately move to try to lift the rubble. Thanks to his body armor underneath his suit, he was able to increase his strength just enough to be able to lift it slightly. The young girl would tap the rubble with her arm once she was freed a little bit, and it started to float and move, making it a lot easier for Izuku. Once they got out of the way, Izuku would pick up the girl in his arms as the 0-point robot was coming towards them. Izuku used his grappling hook to get them out of the way, but just as they had escaped the foot of the robot, its arm was coming down right upon them. Izuku was preparing to turn around and take the brunt of the hit, when a flash of pink went flying past them. It was her, that girl from before. She had a fierce look of determination as she went rocketing towards the robot's head. As she yelled, "Smash!" Instantly, a strong gust of power and wind would go crashing into the face of the robot as it started to crumble upon itself from being destroyed. As Izuku had set down the young girl on the rooftop and the robot was falling, so too was the girl, who seemingly didn't know how to fly. She was worried that this was going to be the end of her unless she figured out a way to stop herself, although thankfully Izuku would come swinging in at the last moment, grabbing her in midair before she fell to her doom and helping bring her to safety as well, although her right arm looked very much battered and bruised. She had put 100% into that attack, and well, it looked like she was paying the price for it yet again. Around that time though, the alarm would go off, and the test, it would be over. Recovery Girl would arrive and would help heal anyone whom had been harmed. Izuku would help up the girl whom he had saved before, who introduced herself as Uraraka, and she was grateful to the both of them for rescuing her. Izuku would also compliment Melissa, as he didn't know she had that type of power in her. Although from being observant, he was able to see that the power was definitely taking a toll on her body, and that probably explained why she was fighting so passively to begin with, because in the end, her body couldn't handle it all right now. Even still, he helped the two girls to Recovery Girl, as she would heal their wounds with a simple kiss. That was her Quirk's ability after all. Izuku would get one as well for doing such a good job, and it helped him recover from his fatigue, and besides a few bumps and bruises, he was fine for the most part. As Izuku had gone back home, he would give a call to Bruce explaining everything that had happened. While he was sure he had done a good job, he felt as though he could have done better, but Bruce would commend him, telling him that no matter what, he was proud of how far he had come, and he knew that Izuku was giving it his all. He also took back what he said about not wanting to help Izuku if he didn't get into UA. Although if Izuku didn't get in, the training was going to be 100 times harder to make sure he got in the next time. Izuku kind of shuddered at this thought, But for now, Bruce told Izuku to simply take a rest, as they would have to wait a week before the results came out anyway. Izuku did just so, as he took the time off to try to recover a bit. One night, while he was walking about, there would be commotion going on. There would be a large explosion from a building nearby, and Izuku ran to see what was happening. It looked like it were a bank that had been robbed, as he saw someone jumping to the rooftops. Izuku knew that it would be against his judgment to get involved, but even still, he couldn't just sit back and do nothing. Izuku took a scarf that he had in his pocket and wrapped it around his face. As he jumped to the rooftops, he began following the assailant. The criminal thought she was going to get away rather easily. That is, until Izuku would cut her off. And just who the heck are you, Scarf Man? No. Well, let's just say I didn't have a chance to bring my costume with me. You're the one responsible for that robbery, aren't you? And so what if I was? What are you gonna do about it? The girl was aesthetically pleasing, to say the least. Her pink hair was tied into two twin tails, as she wore a long-sleeve black dress. It was cut up into a skirt at the bottom, as she wore purple and black striped stockings with black boots. The name's Jinx. I'm new around here. And I take it you are the guy that's gonna bring you in. Oh, are you now? Jinx would usher him forward. As Izuku went running towards her, the two engaged in a flurry of combat. The girl was effectively flexible, able to dodge a lot of Izuku's attacks, but as well as able to counter with her own. As they continued to fight though, Izuku felt like she was only just dodging, like she wasn't really trying at all. Izuku was definitely giving it everything he had as they continued their game of cat and mouse across the rooftops, until eventually they got into a roof of an abandoned building. The girl continued to flip around Izuku over and over again, catching a few of his punches and throwing them back, but Izuku was able to counter with a quick kick to her side, knocking her over. Ow! I thought anyone ever told you not to hit a girl. I'm sorry, but when it comes to justice, I believe in equality, Izuku would say. Is that right? Well, I hope you don't mind if I return the favor. Jinx would jump over to the next building. As she snapped her fingers, there would be a large surge of energy. As Izuku began the chase, the roof he was on would suddenly collapse, and he would find himself falling inside. How did she? As Izuku looked up, he could see Jinx standing over the hole. Sorry, Scarf Boy. Looks like you ran into some bad luck. But let's play again. Bye-bye. Jinx would leave off with the money, as Izuku crawled out of the hole, looking to get away before the police showed up. That was not his finest moment, and it showed that he still had a lot to learn about being a hero. How had she been able to know? As Izuku went back home, he replayed the fight in his mind. He remembered all the times that when he had been trying to attack her, she touched the ground, and when she snapped her fingers, every area she had touched began to crumble and break. Bad luck? Did she have some type of hex quirk? Izuku wasn't entirely sure. Maybe she could store up kinetic energy and then discharge it at a proper time. If that was the case, she was definitely going to be a dangerous opponent to go up against. Although, personally, Izuku hoped that she didn't stay a criminal. He never understood why people did the bad things that they did. He didn't believe that she would be anything like that. If anything, he believed that if given the choice, people should be given a chance to do the right thing. At least, he hoped she would someday. But for now, the only thing Izuku could do was wait. Eventually, he would get his letter from UA, congratulating him, as All Might stated he would be joining the Hero Academia. Izuku's score was not too bad, to say the least. He had actually managed to score 80 points. He had gotten 40 from the robots he had destroyed, and another 40 as rescue points for saving Ochako Uraraka. As a result, he was given a passing grade and was accepted into UA High. Excited by his news, Izuku would give the results to Bruce. Bruce was also impressed. He had figured Izuku might get rescue points along the way, since that was the type of person that Izuku was. But now he had reached the next phase, and it was time for Izuku to get an upgrade. But that would come in due time. Before long, the start of the semester would begin. Izuku was given the school uniform, and he would arrive to UA High, where he would be assigned to Class 1A. As he reached the door to enter into the class, what Izuku saw wasn't too surprising. There were students of every kind, some who were a lot more energetic than others, but everyone was a colorful character in their own right. Of course, Bakugo was the one causing trouble with the one known as Tenya Ida, the two of them fighting over something as trivial as Bakugo having his feet on the desk. However, everyone's attention would turn as they saw Izuku. They were aware of how he had managed to get the score that he had. Someone without a quirk getting a score of 80? That wasn't something to be looked down upon. Ida was the first one to walk up towards him and introduce himself. "Hello, my name is Tenya Ida, and it's nice to meet you. I heard that you were able to score a high grade on the test while being quirkless, no less. It seems as though you have skills and are far more perceptive than I could have possibly have imagined. But even still, I do have to concede that you are a much better hero than I." "Oh, no, it's nothing like that. Really, I was just doing the best with what I had, that's all." As he finished, though, he would be surprised as Uraraka would introduce herself, as well as Melissa. She was here as well. Izuku was pleased to see the two of them and to see that they were doing alright. From out of nowhere, a sleeping bag would stand up with a man that seemed as though he hadn't gotten any sleep in a long time. "Alright, all of you get to your desk right now. It took you 15 seconds to get in order, and that won't do. Alright, I'm your homeroom teacher, Mr. Aizawa, and you will address me as such. Yada yada yada, your syllabus is on your desk. In the back of the class, there are gym uniforms already ready to go. Follow me outside to the testing area so we can begin the Quirk apprehension test." "The Quirk apprehension test?" a girl with pink skin and yellow horns would ask. "But what about orientation with the other classes?" Uraraka would ask. "Orientation? That's just a waste of time. You're all here to be heroes, are you not? Well, let's just skip the formalities and just get straight to business." With that, everyone would make their way outside once they had changed into their class uniform. As they had done so, Mr. Aizawa would explain the idea of the Quirk apprehension test as a way to show what they were all capable of. Mr. Aizawa also explained that this was going to be a way to see what they could do, to see where their skills were at the time. He would take a ball and throw it towards Bakugo. He asked what was his score doing the ball throw in middle school, and Bakugo gave a modest answer. Just as I thought. You guys weren't allowed to use your quirks in middle school, but here it's a lot different. You'll be getting points based off of how you perform in using the test with your quirks in hand. It's not a way to see just how you can do being ordinary, but no, I want to see what you can do being beyond ordinary, to see you at your best. So go ahead, use your quirks, and push yourself to see how far you can go. The students would become very excited by this, as everyone thought that this was going to be fun. Hearing that word, Mr. Aizawa had a devilish grin on his face. You think it's gonna be fun? Fun? Well, here's something for fun. Whoever comes in last place will be immediately expelled. That quickly shut everyone up. But that's not fair. Yeah, we all worked really hard to get here. Fair? You think life is fair? You know what's really unfair? Villains are unfair. Natural disasters are unfair. The loss of life is unfair. The life of a hero is hardly anything but fair. But it's the job of a hero to combat that unfairness. You think what I'm doing is unfair? No, I'm just weeding out the strong from the weak. If you don't have what it takes to be here, I'm not going to waste my time. Izuku would be nervous by this, but he was calm nevertheless. The students would all continue to perform, one at a time. Aizawa took notice of them, but Izuku especially, since he was aware of Izuku's situation. Some of the students felt bad for Izuku, even Bakugo. Sure, he wasn't able to get first on any of the tests that they took, but by no means was Izuku bad, no. His speed, he wasn't as fast as Ida, but he wasn't dead last when it came to speed. He couldn't do the ball throw as far as everyone else, but he was able to throw to a decent amount, almost 300 meters. That wasn't anything to sneeze at for a boy his age. It was almost superhuman, but the boy was quirkless. Mr. Aizawa even tried to use his erasure quirk on him a few times, to no effect. Izuku did the grip strength, the side jumps, and the long jump, all in peak performance, but still, he was quirkless. Ultimately though, when the test came to an end, Mr. Aizawa singled out Izuku. So, Izuku Midoriya, says here that you're quirkless. From what I've seen from your tests, you don't do nearly as bad as one might think, but even still, you are in last place. So tell me, why should I allow you to stay? Izuku simply smiled. Well, sir, if you're our sensei, I like to think that I'm no different than you. Oh, really? I mean, with all due respect, Eraserhead. Eraserhead? A few people in the crowd would murmur. Who's Eraserhead? That would be our sensei, Mr. Aizawa. He's the eraser hero, Eraserhead. He has the ability to erase one's quirks simply by staring at them, although his quirk is only active as long as he maintains eyesight. Mr. Aizawa would raise his brow at Izuku, his hair standing, as he used the capture tape wrapped around his neck to bind him and hold him in place, trying to intimidate him, only it didn't work. With all due respect, Mr. Aizawa, You and I aren't so different when you think about it. Sure, you have a quirk, but it's hardly anything that I would consider to be earth-shattering. I'd be careful what you say next, Izuku. But I am. I'm not saying this to be disrespectful, I'm just saying it to be truthful. You're our teacher, right? But if you were to take this test, I'm pretty sure you would be the dead last. And yet, even still, there's not a doubt in my mind. If you wanted to, you could destroy all of us without breaking a sweat. And your point? You're more than just your quirk. I understand more than anything that me being here is well enough alone marvelous. There have only been a few who didn't have a quirk who were able to achieve any success here in UA at all. And I just want that opportunity. I know it's not going to be easy for me. I know I'm going to have to work harder. I'm going to have to give it my all more than anything else. But I'm willing and I am ready to put in that work. I don't care what you think of me. But don't look down on me just because I don't have a quirk. It doesn't mean that I'm going to half-ass it or I'm not going to give it my all. I have higher aspirations. I want to become the world's greatest hero, no matter what it takes. And I don't care who does or doesn't have a quirk. I will be number one. Hearing him say this, it gave Mr. Aizawa pause. From what he had heard from Izuku, that was the type of determination he was looking for. Mr. Aizawa turned to all of his students. If you can't give the same effort as this boy here, then you have no business being at this school. You all pass. Everyone was a bit shocked by this, except for a few of them, Momo Yaoyorozu being one of them, as she quickly was able to realize that this was all just a deceit, and that he wasn't going to expel anyone. Now, for our viewers, you might be wondering, if Melissa is here, does this mean the class has 21 students? No, it's still 20. Mineta is not going to be in this story. Now, sure, it's the easiest thing to do to get rid of Mineta, but if I'm being entirely honest, if someone has to get cut, it was either him or Invisible Girl, and I just went with Mineta. If you're wondering what happened to him, he's in general studies. He's actually thinking about pursuing a career in hero, fashion, or in support course, or in finance. After all, if Mineta could do anything, marketing beautiful, sexy hero babes, that would be in his line of work. So, that's where Mineta is, in case you're wondering. All of the students would be happily impressed, as they were now going to be moving on into their hero studies. As Mr. Aizawa was preparing to leave, he saw a familiar face. Carrie? Aizawa, it's so good to see you. And what are you doing here? Oh, I can't visit an old graduate friend of mine. Plus, President Mike, well, he wanted to go get drinks, and I figured I had the free time. I see. Mr. Aizawa looked at Izuku, and then he looked back at Carrie. You wouldn't be here because of the quirkless boy now, would you? Now, what would make you say something like that? Oh, I don't know. It's just that he reminds me a lot of you. Oh, you mean because I don't have a quirk? More than that. Well, even still, it doesn't mean that he won't succeed. I mean, I graduated pretty well. When it comes to combat, yeah, you're pretty good. But your grades were lousy. Carrie would look with a comedic face. You don't have to go blabbing my business out there like that. Well, hello there, All Might would say as he came walking through. Carrie Kelly, Mr. Aizawa, it's so good to see you both. Oh boy. And now the pariah. And just what do I owe the pleasure, All Might? Well, I just came to see how the students were doing, and to see if you thought that anyone was standing out. There's a few of them. This group definitely has potential, but it'll be remained in due time. For now, there's nothing we can do except watch and see how they'll grow. All Might would nod in agreement, as the three watched on as the students were preparing to go and change before going home. There were a few that were standing out in particular. Katsuki Bakugo, Shoto Todoroki, Momo Yayorozu, Tenya Ida, Kirishima, as well as Melissa, and then there was Izuku Midoriya, the boy who was quirkless. And yet even still, there was a sleeping force within him, one that they couldn't fully comprehend. Whatever it was, whatever that boy was made of, this hero world was going to need more of it. Because little did they know that even during their times of peace, there stirred something in the darkness, a force that was going to shake the world forever. This concludes What If Deku Was Batman? My Hero Academia, The Dark Knight Returns, Part 2. As always, if you're a fan of today's video and everything else that we have to offer, then please don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, share, and hit that bell for post notifications so you can stay up to date on everything that is Power Core Productions and Podcastings that's to come out now and in the future. Stay tuned for tomorrow's video as we continue Neon Genesis Evangelion Redemption, Book 1, Part 2. What if Shinji went back in time? But anyway, that's going to do it for the end of today's video. I'm Javon Harrington with Power Core Productions and Podcastings. Signing off, and I'll see you next time.